Good evening, everybody. My name is Sally Morris-Pritchard, and I'm a Committee Services Officer with Conwy Council. I can confirm that I've conducted a sound check before the start of the meeting, and so I assume that everyone can hear me. Can I welcome everyone to today's meeting, where we're all attending remotely. In addition to committee members, we also have non-committee members, cabinet members and officers joining us to assist with the discussion. For those viewing the live stream or recording, committee members are identified with an asterisk next to their name. The meeting will be recorded and live streamed and will be available for viewing after the meeting. Should the live stream fail, the meeting will continue and a recording will be available through the Council's website following the conclusion of the meeting. Can I remind members that translation facilities are available and to choose your language of choice. If you wish to speak, please use the raise hand function, and you can also use the chat facility. All microphones will be muted, and if you've indicated your intention to speak, you will be invited to turn your microphone on. If you leave your device for any reason, can you please ensure you're muted and that you turn your video off? So moving on to the agenda, item 1 is appointment of chair. Do we have any nominations?
I'd like to nominate Councillor Nigel Smith for an excellent job, and hopefully long may it continue. Thank you.
I'll second that, please.
Are there any other nominations? No, can't see any hands raised. No, okay, so as per the Constitution, we need to hold a ballot for that, so there'll be a poll on your screens. And only committee members can vote, so if you just bear with me a second, I'll launch.
Sally, you've gone on mute.
Yeah, just bear with me a second. We're just having problems launching the poll. So it should be on your screens now.
So members, I've shared the results. There's 13 in favour for Councillor Nigel Smith and 1 abstention. So therefore, can I ask Councillor Nigel to take the chair?
Thank you, Dawn, and thank you, members. The next item on the agenda is to appoint Vice Chair, and we're looking for nominations. Are there any nominations? If not, I'd like to propose Councillor Sam Cotton carries on her position.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Joan, have you got a nomination?
I was going to nominate Councillor Sam.
I do apologise. That's fine then. You can do it, Joan.
Yes, I would like to propose Councillor Sam Cotton.
Okay, that's fine. Are there any other nominations? No, okay. Sally, are you going to call out names?
I will call out the names for this one. So for, against or abstain. Councillor Carol Beard.
For.
Councillor Phil Capper.
For.
Councillor Jeff Corrie.
For.
Councillor Sam Cotton.
For.
Councillor Keith Eales.
For.
Councillor Pat Hebron. Councillor Chris Hughes.
Obliged.
Councillor Abdul Khan.
Obliged.
Councillor Don Milne.
For.
Councillor John Roberts. Councillor John, you're on mute.
Indeed. Obliged.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harry Saville.
For.
Councillor Michael Smith.
For.
Councillor Nigel Smith.
Obliged.
Councillor Bob Squire.
Obliged.
Councillor Joan Vaughan.
For.
And Councillor Aaron Wynne.
Obliged.
Yep, that's carried, Chair.
Congratulations and thank you. So the next item is declarations of interest. Sorry, apologies for absence is the next item, item 3. Apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies, Dawn?
We have apologies from Councillor Ian Jenkins.
Oh, okay. Any other apologies to members know? Or no? All right, then we'll move on to item 4, which is declarations of interest. Chairman is to remind the members that we must declare a nature of personal interest, if there are any. Councillor Corrie.
Yes, item 8, forward work programme, page
Yes.
660, to consider a report in relation to the disposal of tier prints. I happen to work for that company. Thank you. Could I have a form sent to me to fill in, please, Sally?
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jeff. Okay, members, so we'll now move on to urgent matters. I don't think there are any. Is there any coming late this afternoon, Dawn?
No, there are no urgent matters, Chair.
All right, thank you. So we'll move on to item 6, which is the minutes, which is to approve and sign as a correct record the minutes of the previous meeting on pages 4 to 12. Are members happy with the minutes? Do we need to go through them?
No, I propose this. I'll propose that we accept it as the correct minutes, Chair.
Okay, thank you,
I'll
Councillor
second
Abdul.
them.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Phil Capper. So we've got a proposer and seconder on the minutes. Do we need to show our hands? If members could please show if they're happy. Yeah, I think they're carried. Thank you very much. So we'll now move on to item 7, which is to receive and note the minutes of the local area forum South, which was held on the 8th of March 21 and on the 8th of April this year, pages 13 to 17. These are going to be presented by Councillor Garfield, who's the chair, or Councillor Liz Roberts, who's vice chair. Garfield, are you with us this evening?
I don't believe either of them have joined the meeting, Chair.
Oh, right. Okay. Are there any members from the South with us?
Councillor Aaron.
Councillor Aaron?
Well, that's one way of catching me out if I've read the minutes.
Sorry, Aaron.
I don't think there's anything I need to raise specifically, so I move that we accept the minutes.
Okay.
I'll second that, Chair.
All right. Could members please show with their hands if they're happy? That's great. Thank you very much, members. So item 7.2 is to receive and note the minutes of the local area forum North, which were held on the 22nd of April on pages 18 to 21. And these are being presented by Councillor Harry Saville, the chair of that forum. Evening, Harry.
Evening, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations on your re-election. Look, the minutes are included in the agenda pack. I don't think there's really anything for us to discuss at tonight's meeting that comes from the minutes, so I'm happy to propose that we receive them.
Thank you very much. Do we have a seconder for that?
I'm happy to second, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Abdul. If members are happy to accept those minutes as proposed by Councillor Harry Saville and Abdul Khan, could you please show? Yeah. Thank you very much. They've been approved. We'll now move on to item 7.3, which is to receive the minutes of the local area forum West, which were held on the 19th of March 2021, pages 22 to 24. These will be presented by Councillor Ken Stevens. Good evening, Ken.
Thank you, Chair. Congratulations to yourself and to Councillor Sam for your re-election. Yeah, I would like to present the minutes of the local area forum West to your committee. And I've got any questions that want answering. I'm quite prepared to answer them. We spent really most of the time talking about COVID and the effect on local health services it's had in our area. That was basically it. So there you go, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ken. Is there a seconder to accept those minutes? Councillor Joe, thank you. So if members are happy to approve those minutes, could you please show by raising your hands? Thank you. They've been approved. We'll now move on to item 8, which is to review the forward work programme of the Economy in Place Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Dawn?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So for the purposes of the live stream, I'm Dawn Hughes, the Scrutiny and Committee Services Officer for Conway. The forward plan for the Economy in Place Scrutiny Committee is on pages 25 to 38 of your agendas. Can I advise you just have a couple of issues or comments I've got to make. There's a special meeting of the Economy in Place Scrutiny Committee on the 1st of June, and that will consider the outline business case for landed and coastal defence. So I'd urge all members to attend that meeting. Also, I'm in the process of working with the Business Improvement Manager in ERF to develop a forward plan for the year for ERF. So hopefully that will start populating the forward plan for the next meeting. So that's my updates, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are members happy with the forward work plan?
Councillor Michael Smith has his hand raised.
Councillor Michael?
Yeah. Sorry, the special meeting, is that still this time, 5:30? Sorry, I haven't seen that just yet.
Let me just double check for you.
Was it daytime?
I'm sure it's probably an evening one. No, it's 5:30 on the 1st of June.
Yeah, thank you, Dawn.
I think it's actually a Tuesday though.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, the bank holidays today.
Yeah.
Can I just come in on the forward work programme? Oh, sorry, someone else. Aaron's got his hand up. I'll put my hand up. Sorry.
Okay. Aaron, do you want to come in first?
Okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah, can I just raise that I've still not received a response to the petition, the Watling Street car park petition from Llanrwst residents. I think we discussed it about 4 months ago. So I was just wondering if we can chase them up for a response.
Yes, of course I will.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Councillor Michael, do you want to raise an issue?
Yeah, it's not an issue. It's just a comment really with regards to the affordable housing one that's going to be coming to us in August. That review's been going, looks like it's been going on over the last 12 months, but it'll be quite interesting as we've seen a recent spike in the increased property prices within the county, which can be viewed through the house price index. And it'll just be interesting to see whether that information is as relevant as the report that gets delivered, or whether that will need adjusting in recent months with house prices increasing in excess of £10,000 across the county. So it'll be interesting when we get that one delivered.
Looks like the affordable houses are becoming less affordable. Okay, thank you very much.
I can take your comments back to James to make sure, so they're reflected perhaps in the report, Michael.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
All right, so the second part of this is the combined forward work programme, pages 39 to 67.
I don't have any comments to make on that, Chair. It's there for information so you can see the whole council-wide forward plan.
All right, so if members are happy with the...
We'll note it, Chair.
Yeah, we need a show of hands, I think. So if everybody's happy, could you please raise your hands? Excellent. Thank you very much, members. So we'll now move on to item 9, which is a question to Cabinet members, which I'm not aware of any.
No, I'm not aware of any, Chair.
All right. So the next item, 10, is to consider a report by the Strategic Director of Economy and Place on the following matter, which is the Brickworks Regeneration Programme. And this is to be presented by Caris Bedford. Good evening, Caris, and it's on pages 68 to 79 for the members' information.
Evening all. Can you hear me okay?
We can indeed.
Okay, that's great. Shall I put my camera on? Bear with me a moment. Sorry, start the video. There we go. Okay. So has everybody hopefully had the opportunity to have a look at the report that was in the pack in advance?
Yes.
And also the appendices included were the programme brief and the proposed programme structure. So basically the recommendation is that we want scrutiny to approve the recommendation, which is the establishment of this programme. The programme will just make sure, obviously, that the 3 projects that are in existence already are just managed, consistently. the other recommendation as well is that a nomination be agreed today, so we can have a representation from scrutiny on the programme board within the structure. Has anybody got any questions around the report? It's not a very exciting report, but obviously we had the 3 projects. So we had the Brickwits project that's been renamed now to the Occupation Strategy Project. So it was formerly the Brickwits project, which has been established for some time now. And then we have also got the Business Centre project, which is going to look at the future of the business centre. But also, you know, we have sort of earmarked some land on the brickwork so we can possibly develop a car park in the future, depending on the nature of the use going forward. And then also the waste transfer station. So the options are basically that, you know, we agree with the programme, which will coordinate and ensure a consistent approach, make sure that everything's in line with the project and programme management framework for governance purposes. Or we carry on as is, which is the 3 projects will just carry on in the current form, basically on their own.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Caris. Jane, okay. You wish to come in?
Thank you, Chair. For the sake of the live recording, my name is Jane Richardson. I'm the Director of Economy and Place for the Council. I just wanted to give members the context that you'll all be aware that we've restructured the Economy and Place portfolio recently, brought 2 services together and another service into the portfolio. And so one of the first pieces of work we've looked to do is to put strengthened governance around a number of our big pieces of work. So this is the first of a series of new programme documentation that will be coming to you, all relating to Economy in Place. Others are relating to coastal defence, infrastructure works and regeneration programmes, etc. So more of these reports to come, folks, and just giving you the reason why it's coming now, that we were just tightening up the governance, bringing these projects together within a single programme, and making sure we have the right membership on the board to take this programme forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Councillor Joan Vaughan, you got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Jane. Thank you. I can't see you as Caris. So you've got programmes and you've got project board. Why haven't you got like with a project board? Is this one similar to the ones we've had for the Tremorva Industrial Estate that covers the whole lot? And will local members be on the project board?
So basically what will have happened is the Brickworks did have a project team and a project board was established, but then because of the development with the business centre and the waste transfer station, it was felt that it was better if it was managed as a programme, just to make sure that we had a clear and consistent approach. There will be a delivery group. So we'll have the 3 separate projects that sit sit under the programme, and then there'll be a delivery group as well, which will be made up of representation from the different projects and other key officers from accounts, legal, communications. We are asking for a local member representative as well to sit on the programme board. So depending on the outcome of today's decision, it will go to the local area forum as well for a nomination to sit on the programme board also.
Good, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Phil Capper.
Yeah, I'm happy to propose that we nominate Councillor Nigel Smith as our chairman to sit on the board as the representative from this group.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Phil.
I'm
Councillor
quite happy
Harry.
to second that.
Sorry?
I'm quite happy to second that.
Well, thank you very much, John. Councillor Harry Saville.
Oh, I was only going to propose and then second what's just been put forward. So.
All right, thank you very much. Councillor Granwy.
Thank you for allowing me to speak, Chair. Can I just, I'd like to thank the officers for bringing this site forward. As you know, it's a key site in the heart of Conway. There's a massive potential there, in my opinion, and the work the officers have done to date in bringing the site forward to a position where we can manage the future of it is excellent. And I'm sure as Louise replaces me as the portfolio member, that will continue to work to make sure that we maximise the benefit for the residents and the business of Conway.
Thank you very much. Councillor Anne McCaffrey.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for allowing me to speak. Just a couple of things. Have we got, Karis, have we got confirmation of who's on the project for the waste transfer station? Just a bit concerned that this far down the track, it doesn't seem to be populated, and I assume you've probably got that by now. That's the first thing. Second thing is, I don't know if it's appropriate to ask tonight, but due diligence on the waste transfer station at this site was agreed earlier in the year. So I wonder if that's now been completed and when there'll be a democracy report on it. And then the third thing, and it's just a suggestion really, stroke a request to the committee to consider on the programme board. It would seem to me that, as Economi's just said, this is the key commercial site in terms of economy and actually income strategy for Commie Council. So would you consider putting a finance scrutiny member on the programme board to strengthen the scrutiny and governance, as Jane has just been suggesting? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Anne.
Sorry.
Yeah, carry on. Yeah, sorry.
In relation to the waste transfer station, we do have a delivery group on meeting on Monday, and I'm hoping to capture that information from the project lead, which is Andrew Wilkinson. So hopefully we'll have that populated pretty quickly in terms of who sits on that project, in terms of the structure and the board.
And will you communicate that out then, Karis, as well? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I can share that.
Thanks very much. Yeah.
I'll update the structure and we can get it resent with the minutes.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Chris Hughes.
Thanks, Chair. I was going to nominate Councillor Andrew Wood. I think he's has some strong views on this site and would ensure that the development, if it goes ahead, is developed in an appropriate way. Because I think, no disrespect to yourself, but I think I share a lot of Andrew's views on the site, and I think a number of members do. And I would hope that Andrew would accept the nomination.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Chris. Is there a seconder for that proposal?
Yes, I would second that, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Also, we had a proposal by Councillor Anne that a member from Finance was put on this project board. Do we have a seconder for that proposal?
Yeah, I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Chris. Okay, members. Councillor Andrew.
Thank you for allowing me to speak, Chair. Thank you to Chris and thank you for being endorsed as well. Yeah, I'd be quite happy to help out with that. Yeah, in a subjective and a proper way to bring it forwards, whilst bringing it back to scrutiny if need be. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Pat Hebron.
Sorry, that's an old hand. Sorry.
It's an old hand. All right, thank you very much. Okay, so I presume that we will have to take a small vote on the two. Well, on the proposal that a finance member is suggested.
Chair, I think your vice chair is trying to attract your attention.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Sam.
Sorry, Chair. Thank you. I don't know whether it's me being a bit silly, but does the member that we nominate have to be a member of this particular Economy in Place committee? Because that Andrew's not listed as a member of the committee, much as I'd love him to take the nomination. I just wanted to clarify that.
Oh, very good point.
Hasn't been in the past, Chair.
Yeah.
It's just been a nomination from the committee, not necessarily a member of the committee.
But excuse me, Chair, is Andrew a member of Finance?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, well, there you go. My second still stands.
Okay.
Two birds, one stone.
So can I just clarify, Chair, are we suggesting that Councillor Wood then is the Finance and Resources representation?
That is the proposal.
Yes. Is that what you're proposing?
Yes.
Would you, sorry,
Or would it need to go to finance?
Would it not go to finance for then finance to nominate Andrew on their behalf? I think that would be, I don't know that this committee could recommend on behalf of finance and resources scrutiny. I have to confess, I don't know whether you could nominate, you may be able to nominate Andrew outside of being on Economy in Place. I'm not sure of that if you wanted him to be your Economy in Place. I just know that in the programme framework, we do have to have a scrutiny representative on the board. So I would imagine if you wanted to nominate off committee, you probably could. But I think if you're asking finance resources also to have a nominee, then that would need to come from their committee.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
It does say on the framework here that is to nominate an Economy in Place scrutiny representative. That's on page 79 of the report.
Mr. Chairman, if it helps, I'd be quite happy to nominate Andrew on finance when we have our meeting.
Okay.
I'd be quite happy to second that.
Yes.
Sorry, through you, Chair. In which case, is Councillor Andrew Wood happy to withdraw his name from the nomination, if that's going to be the case?
It was Councillor Chris who actually nominated. It'd be up to Councillor Chris to withdraw his proposal.
No, but if Councillor Wood still wants to be nominated, then if he rejected it, then that would be end of that one.
Just to make it slightly bit more awkward, I'm quite happy to take anybody's nomination. I'm quite happy to serve on the committee, and I'm quite happy to be representative. I'm quite happy to sit next to Jane, and we can have get cracking on this. And yeah, so I better, I would like to scrutinise it. There has been a few things happening, and there's a few things still happening in the background, which some of you might not be aware of. So please, yeah, whichever way suits you, or whichever way makes it easier for you.
All right.
Over to you, sir.
So I think, Dawn, a way forward would be to put to the vote a member from the Finance and Resources Committee, a nomination from there, which I believe is myself, and then to make a recommendation that Councillor Wood is the representative from the Finance and Resources Overview and Scrutiny Committee.
Chair, can I come in there, please?
Sure. Councillor John?
As you quite rightly pointed out on page 79,
yeah,
it actually says that a nominated person from Economy in Place,
yeah,
and a local member, it doesn't say anything else, Mr. Chairman.
No.
So I would like clarification on who are we voting for now? Are we voting in Economy in Place scrutiny representative? Because that's all we're here to do.
Yeah.
That is, like you said, that is a matter for the committee to decide. It suggests in the programme brief that it is a Economy in Place. That will have to be a decision for the scrutiny committee themselves. Are you happy to take a nomination from somebody who's not on the committee? If you are, then we'll take the vote for.
As I said, Dawn, I think that the thing to do is to do the vote for the member from the Economy in Place Scrutiny Committee, which I am the candidate, and then to make the recommendation that Andrew Wood is the scrutiny member from Finance.
But because I've had a proposal and a seconder, is Councillor Chris willing to withdraw his proposal?
Chair, I mean, it's not setting a precedent. There have been previous incidents where the committees have felt that somebody other than a member of the committee was
But it does actually state
all that person has to do is commit to attend scrutiny to give a report if they feel it's appropriate. I mean,
I know what you're saying, Chris, but it's not what we're being asked to decide here this evening.
We're being asked to decide a nomination from scrutiny.
No, it's a nomination from Economy in Place on page 59.
Yes,
79.
It doesn't say to nominate a member of Economy in Place. It says that the Economy in Place Scrutiny Committee is required to nominate a representative
of the Economy in Place Scrutiny Committee.
Yes, not a member of the committee. That's the point I'm making, Chair. It's not. This isn't setting a precedent, because in the past we have done just that and nominated people to represent us who are not necessarily on committee. And I'm not making. I don't want to be an argument of it, but there's been a proposal and a seconder, and I think you've got to vote. You've got to vote on both cases, and that's the easy solution.
Chair, can I come in?
Sure, Councillor Abdul.
Thank you. We have had advice from Jane Richardson, and it's quite clear, in my opinion, that we are to choose somebody from this committee to represent this committee. And Councillor Phil Capper and Councillor Jeff has both said they will nominate Councillor Andrew Wood for when they goes to the Finance Committee. So if I don't want, there's a win-win situation if we go with the advice of Jane Richardson.
Okay.
Just
sorry,
comment.
I'm sorry, no, I do need to clarify the position. So I think you've got two separate issues here. One is who you want the Economy in Place nominee to be. And I understand you have two nominees, one who is on the committee and one who is not, and you can vote on those two people. And then the separate issue is you also want to make a recommendation that there is additionally a nominee from Financial Resources that would then go to Financial Resources for them to resolve. So I think my suggestion would be you resolve this situation about who is your nominee from Economy in Place first, and then make that separate recommendation. Is that clear and helpful?
Okay.
That is clear. That is clear. Thank you, Jane.
So could I just ask Dawn on page 79, what it says that to nominate an Economy in Place scrutiny representative, does that person have to be a member of this committee?
Sure. Yes.
It's quite ambiguous, isn't it? If you could nominate somebody that isn't on the committee to be your representative, I suppose. It doesn't say it has to be a member of the committee in its words on that page, does it? So it is entirely for a decision for the committee to decide. If you want somebody that's not on the committee, that's absolutely fine, but it is your decision. We've had a proposal, a seconder for both. So unless Councillor Chris is going to withdraw his proposal, I suggest that perhaps you have to vote on both.
Take it to the vote. Okay.
I think we have Councillor Harry and Councillor Peter who also want to speak.
Sorry, Councillor Harry Saville.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. One thought that did cross my mind was, obviously it's good if we have scrutiny representation on this programme board. However, what I think might be more useful than having two or however many scrutiny representatives would actually be, and I think Councillor Chris Hughes commented on this, if we had frequent reports coming back to scrutiny committee. So I wonder if by the time of our next meeting, could we see some regular items in the forward work programme for perhaps yourself or Andrew or whoever the representatives are to update both committees? Because as far as I'm concerned, we can have as many scrutiny representatives as we want. As a scrutiny committee member, I would like them to come back and tell us what's happening.
Okay, that's good. Councillor Peter Lewis.
Well, thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak, and pleased to see you back in post. I just really think the committee should have clarification, really. As I understand it, the additional scrutiny place will depend on the programme board sanctioning that. It won't be automatic, so I think perhaps Jane should confirm that. And I think secondly, whilst you can make a recommendation to Finance and Resources, it is at the end of the day up to them to make a nomination if that's their wish.
Yeah, we could only make a recommendation. I totally get that. Thank you, Councillor Peter. Okay, Dawn, if you... Oh, sorry, Councillor John Roberts.
Just to reiterate my point, Mr. Chairman, why on earth would the Economy in Place committee nominate somebody from another committee? We've got enough people on this committee to represent us, and I can't see a problem. That's why I'm voting for it anyway.
Thank you, Councillor.
Could I just follow up John's point? I mean, something that I think is rather persuasive in all this is you know, it wouldn't say an economy and place scrutiny representative if it wasn't meant to be someone from this committee. And with the greatest of respect, Jane's name's on the report as the lead officer. I think we could probably take Jane's advice as what's intended from the report. So I thought what Jane said a few minutes ago got to another sheet perfectly. Personally.
All right. Well, I'm going to get Dawn to take it to the vote, to be honest. I think we've debated it enough.
Yeah, I like you said, because we've got a proposal and seconder, and Councillor Chris is not willing to withdraw his proposal, I think we have to vote on, and then you can decide as members who you wish to represent the Economy and Place Scrutiny Committee. So just bear with me while I set up the poll. Just bear with me.
We've got going to be asking for 5 more nominees next month, so consider this a warm-up act. You'll get another chance in a few weeks.
So I will launch the poll now. So if members of the committee only can vote, please. Thank you. So is that, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, all members have voted, so I'll now end the poll and share the results.
Okay, so it looks like that I am the elected member on the board. Thank you very much, Dawn. Thank you, members. So we will now move on to item 11.1, which is to consider.
Chair, we need to actually vote on the other recommendations now. We need to vote on the recommendations from, which was the, that we have a representative from Finance and Resources, and also to actually recommend this for approval to Cabinet, because we only voted on the nomination.
We can only make the recommendation though, and as Councillor Peter Lewis said, it is up to the programme board whether they accept the nomination from Finance and Resources and whether Finance and Resources want to recommend anybody. So does that really need a vote or just a show of hands?
Yes, well, we need to recommend, don't we, that if agreed, we recommend to the Finance and Resources and the programme board that we have a representative from Finance and Resources. So we need to make that recommendation, and you also need to recommend the programme for approval as well.
Yeah.
Before we do that, Chair, we do have a couple of hands raised. We have Councillor Michael Smith and Councillor Anne McCaffrey.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Michael. Hello, Councillor Michael. I think your headset's not working, Michael. Can't hear you. Okay, we'll come back to Michael. Councillor Anne McCaffrey.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quickie, and sorry for giving you the debate that you've just had in terms of finance. All I wanted to say really is, when I made the suggestion, it was for you to make perhaps one in this board, since it's reporting to yourselves. Obviously, this is a proposed structure. So if you as a group feel that you want to have a member of finance, I think that's something that you can legitimately vote on tonight, and obviously send it over to Finance and Resources to resolve that. So just wanted to be clear, because obviously it's a democratic decision based upon a proposal, but the proposal's yours to change really. So just ask you to consider that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Anne. Councillor Michael? No, we can't hear you. Sorry. Check your microphone settings. Okay. Councillor, no, Dawn, where are we up to? We need to take a vote.
Right, can we have a proposal? Because obviously Councillor Anne cannot propose. We need a proposal for this representative from scrutiny. So I don't think we've officially had a proposal for that.
I'll propose it, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Chris. And the seconder?
I'll second that Chris's proposal, Chair.
Councillor Abdul Khan.
Okay, so now we're clear that we're voting on that we recommend that there is also a representative from Finance and Resources, and that that Cabinet approved the brief structure and the establishment of the Brickworks regeneration programme. Are we clear on that?
Can I be more specific? I think Chris will agree with me that we recommend from this committee that Councillor Andrew Wood to consider Councillor Andrew Wood to be the rep of the Finance Committee.
Yeah, that's what I was thought I was proposing.
Okay.
Well, I will certainly propose him at Finance.
Thank you, Phil.
Okay, Dawn, can we take that to the
Councillor
vote?
Harry Saville has his hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. Just in the interest of stopping us from wasting time, if we're really settled that we think it should be Andrew, why are we particularly fussed about asking Finance and Resources? I mean, if we let Finance and Resources have a pick themselves and send a decision there, if we've decided it should be Andrew, then I don't see what the point in referring the matter to Finance and Resources is.
No, we can only make a recommendation.
Yeah, exactly. So could we not, as a committee, recommend Andrew on the basis of he's shown an interest in it before? He clearly has a number of opinions, and he's got a reputation for doing a lot of due diligence on this sort of work. Could we not just recommend Andrew tonight instead of recommending that another committee recommends it?
Yeah, we will make that recommendation to Finance and Resources. I think that's what Councillor Chris and Councillor Abdul.
Well, no, I was saying, why don't we just recommend it now? Here.
We can only do one rep from here.
Well,
we can't recommend. Finance and Resources is their own committee, aren't they? They may want to appoint somebody else.
Hold on. We can recommend whatever we want, can't we?
Yeah, you can recommend whatever you want, but I'd have to say you can recommend to the Finance and Resources Committee, but it's up to them to decide, isn't it? It's their committee.
Okay.
Yeah, officers are right. It's not our committee, and it's up to them to decide. But I'm sure they will take, what we're saying on board. And Councillor Wood has a proposer and seconder at that committee, so I think it's almost a done deal. So can we take that to the vote then, please, Dawn?
Yeah, Sally will call out the names.
Yeah, so it's for, against, or abstain. Councillor Carol Beard.
For.
Councillor Phil Capper.
For.
Councillor Jeff Corrie.
For.
Councillor Sam Cotton.
For.
Councillor Keith Eales.
For.
Councillor Pat Hebron.
For.
Councillor Chris Hughes.
For.
Councillor Abdul Khan.
Blind.
Councillor Don Milne.
For.
Councillor John Roberts. Councillor John, you're on mute.
Obliged.
Councillor Harry Saville.
For.
Councillor Michael Smith.
Or if you can hear that.
Yep. Councillor Nigel Smith.
Obliged.
Councillor Bob Squire. Councillor Bob Squire.
Obliged.
Thank you. Councillor Joan Vaughan.
Oh.
And Councillor Aaron Wynne.
Obliged.
Yeah, that's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much, Dawn. Sally, should I say? That's been approved. So we'll now move on to next item, I believe, which is to consider a report from the Head of Environment, Roads and Facilities on the following matter. Net Zero Carbon Performance Report, which is on page 80 to 94. And this is going to be presented by Amanda Jones. Good evening, Amanda.
Good evening. I hope everybody can hear me okay.
We can.
I hope my connection holds out. It can be temperamental.
Yeah,
thank you for inviting me along this evening to present to you. It's a very detailed report, so I'll do my very best to go through it in detail and just explain the content. So just to give some background, you will remember that in December we brought our decarbonisation plan to Economi in place, and it then went to full council, and it received unanimous support and approval. I want to thank members for that, and I want to thank members for your support to my team and people involved in the programme in helping us complete a significant piece of work to get us to where we are today. So this report is slightly different to the previous reports that we used to take to Finance and Resources Scrutiny Committee. We have widened the scope of what we measure now in terms of our carbon emissions. So historically, we used to report on, I think it was 4 elements. So it was buildings, it was street lighting, business travel, and our fleet. We've now extended that scope significantly, and we now measure our emissions from things like procurement of goods and services and staff commuting. So as you can appreciate, there's been a lot of work over the last year getting the methodologies in place so that we could capture that data and measure it. And as I go through the report, I will explain to you some of the challenges that we've got in terms of our current methodologies and how we want to change that to improve. But what's really good is that we've actually, we're reporting our emissions in accordance with the draft guidance. I emphasise draft. It's the Welsh Government Net Zero Reporting Guidance. They've been working on it for quite some time now, well over a year. And understandably, because of the pandemic, they've delayed finalising it and publishing it. We were fortunate enough to be able to use that draft guidance and calculate our baseline and this report's information in accordance with that guidance. So we are sort of ahead of the game in terms of monitoring our emissions. Having said that, there's always room for improvement. So I hope as I go through the report, even though we have a new baseline year now. So historically, our baseline year was 2010-11. We've now revised that, our new baseline year. So we're starting again from 2018-19. So we've given ourselves 10 years up to 2030-31 to get to net carbon zero. So the year that we're reporting on in this report is for 2019-20. So it's the first year of us reporting our emissions with this new extended scope. So if you've seen within the report, there's been a slight increase in our emissions. That's because it's the first year, and actually the plan, although we've set up the programme now, the projects are set up, the action that we will take, we're yet to sort of see that develop. So I would reassure you, I would hope to reassure you that this programme is in safe hands and that the data is robust. We're tracking it very closely and we are making progress in terms of the programme, but it all takes time and there is a lot of work to do. And I just want to reassure you all that my team and everybody involved in the Climate Challenge programme will not rest until the job is done. And I want to thank you for trusting us to get that job done. So I'll stop wittering on about that and I will go through the report now. So it starts on page 80, which gives the background, and under section 2, the recommendation is there that, I'm sorry, it says Finance and Resources Scrutiny, that should say Economy in Place. Apologies about that, I have to amend that. I want to provide you with assurance that we are effectively addressing and monitoring our performance against our targets and our decarbonisation plan. So if I'd like to draw your attention to paragraph 3.8.2 on page 82. I'll get straight to the data. So you'll see there chart 1.1 illustrates our emissions and what they are comprised of for our baseline year of 18-19 and the year that we're reporting on of 19-20. So we've calculated our emissions, and as you can see from the chart, we've seen a slight increase of 3% when compared to the baseline year, so the previous year. That is due to emissions from our supply chain, which is our procurement of goods and services, and also from staff commuting. And it's very much to do with the way that we calculate our emissions, and I'll come on to that when I get to the sections on supply chain and staff commuting. So one of the actions we want to take is to actually improve the way that we calculate our emissions, but rest assured the way that we are doing it at the moment is an accepted methodology. And in terms of supply chain, it is a methodology that NRW are using quite successfully. But I'll come on to talk about that in a moment. So the majority of our emissions come from our supply chain at 64%. And that is the case for many of the public sector organisations I've had conversations with that are in the process of calculating their emissions based on this new extended scope. So it is across the board in terms of the public sector. That's followed by buildings. So energy use in our buildings accounts for 20% of the total emissions. And then you may be surprised by this, staff commuting is the next one in line at 8%. Obviously, with home working, etc., in subsequent years, we will no doubt see a reduction in that. But I'll come on to talk about that in a moment. What we've done with our supply chain emissions is we've actually gone into quite a lot of detail in terms of where the types of procurement where we've seen the biggest emissions from. Okay, so I'll move on to the next page, page 83, just to talk to you about buildings. So under paragraph 3.9.2, that reports that we've actually reduced emissions from our buildings by 3% when we compare it to the previous year. So things that have contributed to that, we do now, when we're replacing lighting in our buildings, we replace it with LED as standard because that's more efficient. The behaviour change initiatives that we have run for some time now, a number of years, such as our energy audits, our low carbon schools visits, and please bear in mind the year we're reporting on was prior to the pandemic, so it was pretty much business as usual. We're very, very proactive in going into schools and educating the pupils and getting the schools to set objectives to reduce their emissions. What also contributes to that is also we as part of our accommodation strategy, we are rationalising our estate. And so we've actually, we've seen a reduction in the number of buildings that we occupy, which will always have a positive impact. Something else that we also have to take account of, so it's not just all of the stuff that we're doing, the more that organisations use renewable technology, the more that organisations reduce their emissions, and the energy companies themselves take steps to produce green energy, that actually then we call it the greening of the grids. So there's actually it's cleaner energy, and so what that does is it reduces the overall conversion factor that we use to calculate. So that's played a part in this as well. And chart 1.2 just shows there the breakdown comparing to the previous year, and you'll see the breakdown there. We actually break it down by, and we include leased assets as well. So that's both assets that we lease to other organisations and assets that we lease from others. So we have to include that as part of the new reporting scope. Okay, so that's buildings. I'll move on to the next section now, which is looking at schools, because schools, as you are fully aware, are a big player in terms of our emissions from buildings. They account for more than half of our emissions from our buildings at 52%. And the chart there shows the breakdown in terms of the type of facility. So primary schools 42%, high schools 26%, and the 3 PFI schools at 20%. So there are 3 schools there, and we've had conversations before about how can we incentivise the PFI schools to take action to reduce their emissions. And there is a project under our Climate Challenge programme, which is set up to look at our buildings, including schools, in terms of decarbonising our estate. So rest assured, there's a project there with some key actions and some timescales, which I did present before you in December, to take action to reduce our emissions from our estate. In terms of schools, if we compare to the previous year, they've actually reduced by 2%. So it's a marginal decrease, but the more action we take and the more improvements we make, we'll expect to see more significant reductions there. We also, if you look at section 3.11, which is on page 85, we also track the weather to determine whether it's just luck that we are reducing our emissions. Is it because we've had a warmer winter, for example? Does the weather really play a part? And you can see from chart 1.4 there, the purple line there is our emissions from our buildings. So you can see there's been a slight decrease. And the green line is the average temperature for each of the years. So you can see that in 1920, it was a little bit colder on average. So without doing anything, we would expect to see our emissions increase, but actually we've managed to sustain them, and actually with a slight reduction. So it kind of, in a crude sort of way, evidences that what we are doing is making a difference, and it is not just because we've had a warmer winter or a warmer year. We actually haven't. So we use that as a sort of a crude indicator that what we're doing is working as well. I'll move on now to section 3.12 to look at our fleet. So these are the council's vehicles and the fuel that we use in those vehicles. So if we compare to the previous year, we've actually seen a reduction in emissions from our fleet by 4%, and things that have contributed to that decrease. So it's now part of business as usual, that when we're looking to replace a vehicle, we will look to see whether we can actually get a lower carbon solution. We monitor our driver behaviour in terms of speeding, etc. So we monitor that, and if we notice there's some driver training required, then we take steps to do something about it. We no longer use LPG, liquid petroleum gas, and we've also, where we've seen improvements in working practices, for example, the issuing of mobile devices to some of our operational staff to receive work requests, to save them having to keep coming back to the office and then go out again. So that has made a difference. And also there's been some route optimization for some of our rounds to make them more efficient. So that is making a difference. It's kind of a bit of a double-edged sword as well, because our vehicles have to comply with what they call the Euro 6 emission regulations. So we measure the emissions from the fuel going in to the vehicle. But there's also, you can measure the emissions that come out of the exhaust pipes. So that's what the Euro 6 emission regulations are all about. And in order for us to comply with that, there needs to be some technology in the vehicle. I'm not a mechanic, so please excuse me. But basically what that means is, in order to reduce the emissions coming out of the exhaust, it actually requires more fuel use, believe it or not. So we kind of have to balance that. It's a bit of a balancing act, but it's something that we monitor. There is, under the Climate Challenge programme, there is a project. It's our Net Zero Emission Fleet project, and the key actions within that project are for us to look to electrify our fleet. So to switch to electric vehicles, or depending on what the most favoured technology is at the time, to look for a lower carbon option in terms of our entire fleet. And we're taking steps to do that and making progress with that. So that of course requires some investment, because the cost of some of the larger electric vehicles at the moment is quite significant. And it also involves sometimes a lot of testing of vehicles. We have some of our services where they have to carry equipment, and if you're using an electric vehicle, you need to make sure the battery life can sustain the service that you're delivering. So all these things are taken into account, but we have a project set up to take action to get us to net zero with our fleet, or to contribute to the overall target of net zero. So that is our fleet. What we've also done, another sort of, is quite a crude thing to look at, but we've looked at, we look at our gritters, and we look at the fuel consumption of our gritters, and we actually compare that to the average temperatures during the winter to see if we've had a colder winter, is there a correlation between that and increased fuel use in our gritters. And on page 87, you'll see we've tracked that, and so the purple line is our fuel use in our gritters, and the green line there is the average winter temperature. So they are in correlation, although I've been told by the experts in terms of gritters, it's actually the road surface temperature that they go by and not the air temperature. So perhaps that's something here we can look to change that and monitor it against that instead. But there is a correlation there. So it's a bit of a crude measure, but it gives us an indication there of why the fuel use in gritters has increased slightly. Another area that we monitor is street lighting. And now that includes our CCTV, because that's part of the extended scope. So this is a real success story because of the brilliant work the street lighting team are doing to replace our lanterns with LED. So we've seen a 20% reduction in a year, and it is a real success story. We also look at the wattage of our street lighting assets. We monitor that as well. But this is down to the replacement programme. Of course, they can't put new lanterns on deteriorating columns, so the capital investment in columns is essential to the success of this programme as well. But yeah, a real success story. We've actually got, under the Climate Challenge programme, there is a project set up specifically to convert all of our street lighting to LED and again contribute to the net zero target. So again, another focused piece of work under that programme. And there's the chart on page 88, which just demonstrates that reduction. Moving on to section 3.14 on page 88, grey fleet travel. So this is where we use our cars for business purposes. And that is something we have always measured historically. We've actually reduced our emissions from grey fleet travel by 6%, which is great. And this is something that we track year on year. We get the data from mileage claims. So we need data on people's vehicle type, what fuel it is, and then we calculate it based on that. So in 1920, there were actually 54,000 fewer miles claimed compared to the previous year, and that resulted in a saving of nearly 33,000. Many years ago now, the total value of our mileage claims for the authority was nearly £1 million. It's significantly reduced now to in the region of about, I think it was £200,000. I'll double check the figures, but a significant reduction. And again, the things that have contributed to that, so this is before the pandemic when we're all now working from home, but this is as a result of the modernisation programme where work-wise, the greater use of technology as we're using today to mitigate the need for travel, and also the service transformations that have happened in ERF and in social services, where we've actually made our services more efficient through those transformations. So it has had an impact. And again, we've got another project set up to look at our grey fleet travel. So focused piece of work looking at how we can get our emissions from our grey fleet travel to as close as zero as possible. And that'll be things like, looking at a workplace travel plan, a travel policy, perhaps a hierarchy of travel we've talked about in terms of, first of all, eliminating the need for travel and then using the lower carbon options. Linked to that will be, obviously, we need the infrastructure as well, which will support low carbon travel or more sustainable travel if we want people to choose those options, we need to make it easier for them to do so. So that is a project that will look at that. And on page 89, the chart 1.8 just illustrates that reduction. The next area, this is new to our scope, staff commuting. So under section 3.15, the way that we calculate this, and it is an accepted methodology by Welsh Government, is that we take the postcode of where people live, so where staff live, we get their postcode. And then we get a report from iTrent, which gives us the postcode of their main work location, whether that be an office, whether that be a depot. And what we do is we calculate it. We calculate the distance, and then we calculate the emissions based on that distance. So that is an accepted way of calculating it. And I know other local authorities have struggled with how we're going to get this data. We did consult with the company that wrote the Welsh Government guidance, and they said this is an accepted methodology. As we continue to report on this method, on this factor, we will see improvements in the quality of the data, because as you can appreciate, when we get the report, say, for example, it says somebody's based at Coed Petler when actually they're not, they're based in Bodlondeb. It's about us quality checking that data and fine tuning it and making sure that we get it right. So we've seen an increase, a slight increase in emissions because we've improved the quality of the data. It's of no concern to me, because that's what I would expect. But again, as we go through, we need to improve the methodologies that we use, and to get actual data would be much better. So if we could get everybody recording their mileage to and from work every day, and we had a facility to record it, that would be the best way to do it. And we may be able to do that. It's something we're going to look at anyway, because we have to make quite a few assumptions when we're calculating for this factor, as I'm sure you can appreciate. But rest assured that the data that we have is as accurate as we can get it based on what we know at this point in time. But I also sit on a Welsh Government carbonisation group. It's North local authorities and NRW, and we have discussions about things like this. So collectively, we're all looking for solutions on how we can make the data better and report on actual raw data and reduce the number of assumptions, because then that gives us a more accurate picture. So rest assured that we are working on this one. And again, there's another project set up to focus on this, to look at how we can reduce emissions from commuting. It will most likely happen naturally, depending on the outcomes of the renewal programme. And I think in some respects, the pandemic has taught us all that perhaps we can work differently, and we've learned a lot of valuable lessons that we can incorporate. So yeah, it's very, very exciting piece of work that's ahead of us on this one. Land use. So land use is included. What that does is actually it has a positive impact on our carbon baseline, because it takes carbon out of the atmosphere. So it's actually reported as a negative figure. So we calculate that based on a different land that we've got and the type of land, and each type of land has a different factor. We haven't seen that change yet, because we haven't changed our land type or our land use, but we do have a project again under the programme that is looking at carbon offsetting, because when we get to net zero, we will have some what we call residual emissions, and we've estimated at this point in time that's going to be about 11,000 tonnes. So we need to do something with those residual emissions. So that's either we offset by planting trees. So that is one of the key actions within our plan, to look at maximising our opportunities for tree planting. But something else we're also looking at, we're looking at our urban trees, because there was a piece of work carried out by, I think it's Manchester Community of Trees, where they actually worked out the carbon absorption from their street trees. And so we're looking at that as part of this project. So again, another focused piece of work to deal with those residual emissions. And the saving the worst till last, it's not the worst, please, it's not, but it's very interesting actually, but supply chain. So this is emissions from what we buy. So the goods and services that we buy. There are different ways that you can calculate it, and there are 3 tiers within the Welsh Government methodology, with tier 3 being the most accurate way, and that would be if we were able to get the energy data from our suppliers. So for example, if we've got a residential care contract and we were able to get the energy consumption data from the care home, for example, the heating and the lighting of the facility that they use to provide that service to our clients, that would be classed as a tier 3 methodology. Another accepted methodology at tier 2 is based on spend. So we work out how much we spend and we categorize it, and we categorize it based on a SIC code, so a standard industry code. So we've got, as you see under 3.17.4, we've got some categories there: products from land and sea, food and drink, and services. So using that example, residential care, we'd categorize under services. And there's a specific conversion factor for that category. So we use that conversion factor. So we times that conversion factor by the amount that we've spent. So that is how we calculate it at the moment. That's how NRW have calculated theirs, and it is an accepted methodology. But there's a flaw in that methodology, because if we increase our spend, our emissions increase. So we either, the conversion factors change as part of a national decarbonisation of the supply chain, which needs to happen. And that's where national government need to have a hand in helping businesses reduce their emissions, because by doing so, that will decarbonise the supply chain. So that's one side of it. But what I want to do as part of this project is I want to get the actual data from our suppliers. I want to build terms and conditions within contracts for our suppliers to monitor their emissions, and that they give us that data so that we can get the actual data. And so we know that we're reporting on actual emissions rather than what we spend, because if we increase our spend, as we inevitably will, our emissions will increase. So that is one of the areas of work that we're looking at. This is an issue across all public sector organisations, because they're all subjected to the same requirements in terms of net zero carbon reporting. So that we've discussed it at length at the decarbonisation group that I attend. And we're looking at working collaboratively, I can't say it, to come up with a solution and a methodology that we can all use. The other thing that we are looking at the moment is hopefully a joint project with Denbighshire to crack this one, because we can't do it on our own. It needs to be everybody working together. So these are the pieces of work that are going on behind the scenes as part of this project, which again comes under the Climate Challenge programme. So we're doing a lot of work behind the scenes to see what we can do collaboratively and what we need to do from a Conway perspective to get more accurate data, but also to help our suppliers reduce their emissions. So that's the status with that one. So that's why there's been an increase, because of the way that we calculate it. So that brings me to the end of my report. I hope you're all still awake. It's a topic I'm really passionate about, but I do go on a bit, so please excuse me. And I apologise, the recommendation refers to finance and resources. I will get that amended. I apologise for that. So I'm happy to take questions.
You're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you, Amanda. And can I just say that the report is really interesting and opens your eyes to the amount of work that you and your team have obviously done. and it's absolutely fascinating. And I can see there's a number of people want to get in here. So Councillor Michael Smith.
Hi Amanda, and thanks for the report. One of my more enjoyable reads, because I'm getting quite passionate with the whole environmental movement of, and more so of recent, having purchased an electric car. So there's a couple of things that you've actually answered since I put my hand up right at the beginning, wanting to speak. So the accepted methodologies is what we're working with. That, you know, that's you know, it's the information that we're able to measure ourselves against from Welsh Government and national governments. And it's really great to hear at the end of your report that you're trying to take it one step further by looking at this tier 3, which seems to be a difficult thing for you to try and do. But I was wondering whether that you would, and you said that you'd like to write into contracts, but whether it could come under some kind of corporate responsibility within the contract for the supply chain as well as the PFI schools. And you know, if we could ever look to force that into it, that would be a way that we keep our finger on the pulse, and that would be really great. Secondly, if I could just look at, you've commented about the commute of staff, and again, that data is going to be quite hard with the varying levels of vehicles that people drive and the age of them and how they perform. Is there anything we could look to do as a local authority to encourage our staff through incentives to get greener vehicles? You know, I'm sure that we have at the moment some kind of deal with Vauxhall to point colleagues there for discounts in them vehicle. I'm sure it was a vehicle maker like that. So could we, you know, could we incentivize that? And secondly, to that commute and the green vehicles, is the technology for electric vehicles is ever increasing. You know, that they're getting more mileage. So I've learned just with a month or so of having an electric vehicle that the idea of the way you drive is just different. So if you travel to work and you need a charge to get home, you do that at your place of work, or if you're an out and about driver, on your lunch break, because a 40-minute charge will charge you back up to full on a fast charge. So you know, it's incentivizing people to dip their toe and be brave, and for us to champion that as their employer to give it a go, really. So yeah, I thank you for the report. I would accept the recommendation to economy in place, not finance, but I'm sure they're going to find it equally as exciting to receive, if they haven't already, with the financial savings they're going to be making through this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to pick up on your points about the incentivising staff to pick sort of lower carbon options, that is something that will be looked at as part of the both the grey fleet and the staff commuting projects, is looking at our things like our policies and how they can incentivise staff to choose the lower carbon options. So thank you for that.
Yeah, very interesting points you've raised there, Michael. I recently read a report from the Cabinet Member for Modernisation, Councillor Emma Leighton-Jones, and in that report, it stated that because of the COVID outbreak, the mileage reduction has reduced by 965,922 miles, which has brought a total saving of £425,226, which is round about 0.5% of our precept, and no small figure. So it's this new way of working is certainly bringing additional benefits. Could I bring in Councillor Aaron Wynne?
Chair, could I just come in specifically on Councillor Michael's point? Sorry, I appreciate there was people before me, but we do have a salary sacrifice scheme for purchasing cars, with electric cars. So it comes out before you pay your tax, which is a big benefit. But with electric cars, your benefit in kind, I think it's 1% rising to 2% next year. So there's already a really big financial advantage to people to do that. Maybe needs a bit more pushing, a bit more awareness. But I recently switched to Octopus, who are a green supplier, and they're bringing in
me too.
a really interesting tariff, though, where you charge your car overnight when it's cheap, and then you can run your house during the day. A fully charged car will run your electricity in your house for a couple of days. So that challenge of being at home, I'm working at home, but I've still got 2 cars parked outside, which is costing me money. If I could run my electricity greener off those, then it's kind of a win. My car's cheaper, I'm running my house cheaper, and it's obviously much better for the environment.
Yeah.
So really
Can I
excited.
just come back to Charlie? That's exactly what I did. Swap to Octopus, changed my car to electric, and did it exactly as you said. So maybe not proposing to tell our members to jump to Octopus, sorry, our staff, but trying to find some literature to educate them how beneficial it can be, because people are still so skeptical and don't understand it, and it's that learning of the unknown that we could really help them with, maybe. Thank you.
Yeah, Octo buddy, Michael, you and I.
Could I just, just mention, I forgot to mention earlier, we actually have got a very detailed communication plan which sits alongside our programmes. So, we're looking at how we can educate staff, raise awareness, etc. So thank you for your input.
Excellent. Councillor Aaron Wynne.
Diolch cadeirydd, a diolch i ti, Amanda, ac i dy dîm hefyd am yr adroddiad ac am eich gwaith diwyd. Mae'n glir iawn o'r adroddiad yma bod y mwyafrif o alluriadau carbon y cyngor yn dod gan ein cyflenwyr a chyntractwyr, fel ti wedi sôn yn dy gyflwyniad. Mae yna ddyletswydd arno ni, dwi'n credu, i edrych ar ein supply chain a gweld os fedrwn ni gefnogi ein contractwyr yn well, a hefyd gweld os oes angen i ni wella ein polisi caffael, neu procurement policy. Mae'n debyg byddai prynu mwy o wasanaethau a nwyddau gan gwmnïau lleol yn helpu dod ar canran. Dach chi dal gallu gofyn? So mae'n debyg byddai prynu mwy o gan gwmnïau lleol yn helpu dod ar alluriadau carbon i lawr, a helpu cyrraedd y nod, wrth gwrs, o yn carbon neutral. Felly, gai yn y lle cyntaf cynnig, Michael, bod ni'n derbyn yr adroddiad, ond gai hefyd gynnig yn bod ni yn gofyn am adroddiad arall i'r pwyllgor hwn mwyn sbiad ar ein polisi caffael, i gael dadansoddi'r data o lle mae'r bint conwy yn cael ei wario, ac i weld os oes angen i ni gyrfhau ein polisi caffael lleol. Diolch.
Thank you for that, Councillor Aaron. Yes, our net zero emission supply chain project is actually, the project manager is somebody from our corporate procurement department, which is great. We are the joint project with Denbighshire that we're hoping to progress. We're hoping to work with a consultant that can do some analysis of our spend, basically to look at where we are spending our money in terms of geographically as well. So that in terms of spend local, we're hoping to start that piece of analysis very, very soon, because that will then give us some areas where we'll understand what our target areas are in terms of spend and encouraging for things to be more local. And of course, we have to define what we mean by local. But yeah, we are considering that within the scope of that project.
Yeah, very interesting point. And what you mentioned before, Amanda, about asking companies to bring or to only buy-off companies that can bring forward a carbon plan, we may in a way be penalising our local suppliers who would have a lot less carbon footprint delivering the goods than somebody who's coming from further afield who may be able to supply that information. Also on the street trees, Councillor Gronwy has just said that he's planted 15,000 trees in the last, I think it was 15,000 trees or 5,000 trees in the last 15 years. And I know that locally, Town and Kimmel Bay Town Council have had a tree planting scheme running for a couple of years and pushing forward with that. So they all need to be taken into consideration. There's
Definitely.
plenty of work. Plenty of
Well
work to keep you busy. Councillor Chris Hughes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Amanda, for the report. It's excellent. I'd certainly like to associate myself with Councillor Aron's comments as well, with regards to certainly organisations that manufacture locally. I think it's not. Then we tend to look at the price rather than the cost. When I say the price of something, you know, I'm talking pounds and pence, whereas the cost of something is significantly more than pounds and pence. And I think that is something we need to look at. What I really wanted to talk about, though, Amanda, is section 316 of your report talks about land use, and does that include parkland?
Yes,
as well as forest land? Yes. Yeah. The reason I ask is because obviously we are, as a country, we face a crisis in terms of ash, which on Conway's land represents around about 60% of our green canopy. So we potentially over the next couple of years will be losing around 60% of our carbon sink. What plans are you looking at to replace that? Because, you know, that is obviously a huge amount, although it's only 1% of Conway's emissions, but 1% is still a significant amount of emissions. And also I'm conscious of the fact that Conway intends to develop on some green land that it owns with the removal of trees. What are we doing in terms of replacement of trees when they're removed? The third part of that question also relates to planning, to the authority's policy on planning permissions. When we grant a planning permission which results in the removal of trees, is that counted as part of our carbon contribution? Because certainly there are organisations that think that should be counted and that we should take into account when approving planning permissions the impact that it will have, not only what it provides but what it takes away as well.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Chris. The project manager for the carbon offsetting project is actually our open spaces manager. So in terms of ash dieback, there's an ash dieback recovery plan that he's managing, because that's within his section. So he's also project managing the carbon offset. As part of that, have a specific target in terms of treatment. So it's a case of making sure that we plant sufficient numbers to offset what we're anticipating losing. So that's where the two, they won't be in isolation, so there will be some overlaps there. In terms of any sort of procedural or policy implications from what we're trying to do, we will look at all of the policies and the procedures that relate to the specific project that we're focusing on. So, for example, planning permission. Whilst the scope of this particular project is looking at our land, and so in terms of street trees, it would be the street trees that are on sort of public land. Any sort of impact on policies and procedures would be looked at as part of that project, so they certainly won't be forgotten about. But in terms of the carbon offsetting project, we have specific targets in terms of tree planting, and also looking to get the street trees.
Amanda, do you want to turn your camera off? Because you're cutting out.
Am I cutting out? Oh, I'll stop my video.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, shall I start again? So the carbon offsetting project is being managed by our open spaces manager, and he's also the manager responsible for the ash dieback recovery plan. So the two complement each other in certain respects. As part of our plan for the carbon offsetting project, we have targets to plant so many hectares of trees. We will also be looking at our policies and procedures that relate to that. So, for example, if we are disposing of land, to make sure that we consider, can we use it for something that is carbon positive before we dispose of it. So these are all the things that we will look at as part of that project. Did you catch all of that? Can everybody hear what I'm saying?
Yeah. So what you say, we're not looking at the impact our policies have on land, just at the land within our ownership, the assets within our ownership.
The current scope of that project is looking at our land and what we use it, how we can use it to offset our emissions. But having said that, we will not look at that in isolation, because we've also going to set up what we call a stakeholder engagement forum. So we've mapped our key stakeholders internally and externally, and we would like to influence our stakeholders to change their behaviour to be more carbon positive as well. So we're certainly not, it's not fallen off the radar.
Fine. Okay, something I perhaps need to take up somewhere else, because certainly I think that if we do something, we should be responsible for our acts and our emissions. And we know that through the planning process, we're delivering a LDP, which will require around about 5,000 to 6,000 new homes over the next 15 years. Now, that might not seem a lot compared to the numbers that have been delivered in the past, but a number of those sites are wooded, and it will have an impact on the carbon sink that we have within the county.
Yeah, apologies, Councillor Chris. I also forgot to mention that it's not reflected in this report, but there is another project that falls under our programme, which is a local area energy plan. And I believe that would cover what you're actually referring to, because that is looking at a sustainable energy plan for the county. So that is working with our energy providers, the district network operators, and developers, in terms of making sure we've got a sustainable energy system within the county. So that, I think, that would cover what you're referring to.
Thank you, Amanda. I appreciate that.
Well, I'm mindful we've got a number of speakers waiting. So, Councillor Don Mill.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much, Amanda, for a very detailed report and an even better explanation and communication. Clearly, answers to do with our buyers. But I've got one area and that is looking at the figures for schools. We see something in the region, I think 4 high schools at 26% and 3 PFIs at 3%. Now, assuming that the PFI schools are all modern build, more efficient, etc., albeit now a few years old, it is surprising to see that the older schools are not contributing any greater amount, considering it's 4 of them to 3, in fact, slightly less per school. Taking that into account, my concern is, are we, when looking at the development of the supposed new Band B schools coming on, are they going to be developed as being net zero developments?
I think you may need to turn your video off, Don.
Sorry, didn't you get the question?
I caught part of it, Councillor Don.
Okay, I'll just very quickly, briefly try and repeat it. Given that the
PFI schools are generating 20% to the high schools of 26%. They're clearly, the modern development of PFI are actually not any more efficient in the use of energy and emissions. Learning from that, are we looking at developing the new developments of Band B schools and perhaps Band C schools after that? Are we developing those sites as being net zero?
The project to look at our estate will include schools, and one of the key actions within that is actually developing a sort of a design standard that all buildings have to comply with to get us to net zero. So the officers that are involved in the modernisation of our buildings will be involved in designing that. So there'll be a minimum standard to help us achieve our net zero.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Don. Councillor Peter Lewis.
Well, thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak. But after all, you have pinched this from finance and resources, and hence my reason for attendance this evening. I've got two questions for Amanda. Following on really from what Councillor Don has just raised, it would appear, looking at the chart on page 84, that primary schools appeared more efficient than the others. And I just wondered, she mentions the 2% reduction, whether it was a common across all the sectors, or whether one sector was actually performing better. And the second question really was that whether she could give the actual numbers of hectares of forest land that related to the 452 tonnes of CO2. Thank you.
Okay, in terms of, thank you, Councillor Peter. In terms of the schools and in terms of the raw data, I don't have that in front of me now, but I can provide you with that, because we do have the consumption data for gas, electric for all of our schools. So I can tell you, I'll come back to you on that if that's okay. We have what's contributed to the decrease is if the lighting needs replacing, it now gets LED gets replaced as standard, and also we've done some boiler replacements in our schools for more efficient boilers, so that's what's sort of helped. But in terms of who the better performers are between the different categories, I'll have to come back to you on that data, because I don't have that in front of me this evening. And in terms of the land use data, again, I don't have the actual raw data in front of me in terms of what comprises the amount, but I do have a detailed breakdown of it, which I will share with you.
Okay, appreciate that.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Harry Saville.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. It's just a question for Amanda about the targets for this programme as we, look into the future. I had a look at the targets that were brought to this committee back in December, and you're going to have to forgive me if the numbers are approximate, but we had a chart at the end of the presentation we were given that had, at the end of this project, I think it had effectively mitigation measures that were going to cover 2,000 tonnes of carbon emissions, and then there was a remaining offsetting requirement that looks on the chart to me to be around 13,000 tonnes. I just wondered whether or not any more progress had been made in identifying how that offsetting requirement would be met. I mean, if we have a look at the chart, it shows, steady decrease year after year in most cases, until you get to the final year of the programme, where you're looking to reduce our carbon emissions by over 20,000 tonnes in 1 year. So I just wanted some reassurance that some progress had been made on trying to close that gap for 2030-31.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Harry. So the residual emissions that were referred to in that chart, I think they're about 11,500 tonnes. And that is what the carbon offsetting project is all about. It's about looking at how we can deal with those residual emissions. So we've got actions to increase our tree planting. We've got actions to look at the carbon absorption from our street trees. And also there are some other actions, and off the top of my head, I can't remember all of them. So that, just to hopefully reassure you that we're not resting on our laurels when we get to that net zero, because net zero obviously means we've still got residual emissions. We intend to deal with those residual emissions through that project. So for each of the elements that I've reported to you today, we have a specific project to address each one. So that means there's a focused piece of work to reduce the emissions to as close as zero as possible, so that the overall target of net zero, that we're able to reach that. And that includes not forgetting about those residual emissions. There is a focused project specifically looking at that.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Harry. Pat Hebron, Councillor Pat.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Amanda, for a really good report. It was so interesting and engaging. I wanted to ask about schools again, and in relation to consumption, energy consumption, with particular focus on COVID and the importance of ventilating rooms in an attempt to keep down the virus, particularly in the winter. Where I work, we open windows, doors are opened, to get the air moving round. Obviously that could impact on consumption and emissions. And with the design of new schools, will systems be put in place for a better way of ventilating schools in the future to take in consideration COVID? And finally, could we have more trees in schools?
Thank you, Councillor Pat. Yeah, ventilation was one of the things that we highlighted in the risk register for the Workwise 2020 project, because we flagged it up as a risk, because if you have to have more windows open, to get the increased ventilation, there is a risk that in the winter that you have to put the heating up because it's cold. So we've flagged that up as a risk, and it's something we're monitoring closely as part of the net zero emission estate project, which will look at our buildings, it will look at our schools. We will need to find a way of mitigating that risk in terms of efficient ventilation systems, etc. I'm not the expert in terms of facilities management, I'm afraid, but that is something that project will look at. And because, as I say, we flagged it up as a risk, so we recognise that, but we track the data very, very closely. In terms of schools, we're currently analysing the data sort of for the first year of the lockdown, to see what the impact of COVID has been on energy consumption from our buildings. And so I don't have that in front of me now, but it is something that we're looking at the moment, to see whether there's been a positive impact or a negative impact. My gut feeling with schools is that they've been open to look after the children of key workers, so they would have still been using energy in that respect, but whether there's been a reduction, that's what we're looking at right now. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I was just, talking about planting trees everywhere.
Oh, that's right, yes.
We need as many trees as possible, and it'd be good to have them in schools as well.
And that is something, I think, as part of the carbon offsetting project, we'll look at that. We'll look at our estate. We'll look at what land we've got in terms of schools. And if there is scope to do that, then definitely we need to maximise every opportunity. So, yeah, I'm grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I agree. Get them children planting trees. Councillor Gregg.
Oh, thank you for letting me speak, Chair. I just wanted to thank Amanda publicly for the amount of work her team and the programme board have done on this. There is such a phenomenal scope to this and so many variables. The amount of data they have to process is quite unbelievable. Going back to what Councillor Harry said about the end figure in 10 years' time, 11,500. again, that is very variable because we've got different things happening now. I was reading on yesterday, national policy will be to ban all fossil fuel boilers by 2025. That will have a knock-on effect in what we're doing on this. Will all help improve it. So obviously it's a bit of a moving feast, but it's one we're very much on top of, and we're determined to deliver what we've said we do for the council.
Thank you, Councillor Gregg, and I would agree. Your team of officers are doing a sterling job, and I want to thank Amanda for a most excellent and really interesting report. I'm going to take it to the vote. We've got a recommendation by Councillor Michael, which is 2.1, is to recommend to the Economy and Place Scrutiny Committee are provided the assurance that the authority is effectively addressing and monitoring its performance against the carbon reduction targets and its decarbonisation plan. So I presume we need a seconder for that proposal. Councillor Pat? And Dawn, will this be a show of hands?
Yes, show of hands, Chair.
Oh, Sally, thank you. Okay, members, if you're happy with that, could you please show by raising your hands? I think that's pretty much unanimous. Thank you very much.
Chair.
Yes, Councillor.
I had a proposal as well.
Oh, did you? Sorry. What was that, Councillor Aaron?
Sorry, I think my connection is breaking out to this committee, looking at our procurement policy to see if we need to strengthen it or revisit the local procurement side of it.
Yeah. Okay, sounds very good to me. Was that seconded by someone?
I seconded it, Chair.
Councillor Chris, thank you very much. So we've heard the proposal there from Councillor Aaron. If members are happy with that, could you please raise your hands and show? Yeah, that's agreed as well, Aaron. Thank you very much, and to you, Chris, as well. Dawn, I hope you're taking the notes for that.
Yes, we are.
Excellent. So we'll now move on to item 11.2, which is the safety requirements for highways electrical contractors, pages 95 to 102. And this is going to be presented by Dylan Jones, the Traffic Network Manager. Good evening, Dylan.
Good evening all. Thank you for the invitation to my first scrutiny committee for Conwy Council, which I'm sure will be the first of many. So I'd like to present the report for the safety requirements for highway electrical contractors. So I'll summarise the key points and also the recommendations put forward by the report. Now, the council has responsibility for the safety of street lighting and electrical assets on the highway, such as illuminated signs. This includes the use of street lighting columns, cabinets for festive lighting in public spaces in or above the highway. Now, the installation of festive lighting is generally carried out by contractors commissioned by town and community councils. Therefore, the council issues conditions for the installation of these festive lightings, which set out the safety requirements for contractors working on highway electrical equipment. The conditions are reviewed and updated annually and distributed to town and community councils accordingly. In March this year, the conditions were revised to include the requirements for contractors to be accredited by the Highways Electrical Registration Scheme, known as HERS, as recommended by the Health and Safety Executive and Institute of Lighting Professionals. An interim advice note was issued to town and community councils offering guidance and setting out a 6-month transition period for contractors to become HERS accredited. Now, from an asset owner and client's perspective, i.e. the council being the owner and the client who commissions the works would be the town and community councils, the critical function of requiring HERS accreditation is to fulfil the legal duty to ensure work is carried out by competent persons. Now, the scheme encompasses all industry safety requirements for working on the highway to carry out electrical work safely. This includes not only that electrical training is up to date and relevant to highway, not domestic work, but that operators are licensed to legally install stuff like traffic management to understand the risks of working on the public highway, and also have relevant cherry picker operator's license. The aim of requiring the HERS accreditation is to ensure a common and verifiable standard of competence for contractors working on the council street lighting equipment and within the public highway, and to ensure the safety of everyone working or travelling on the public highway. Now, I just want to draw your attention to the risk implications as set out in the report, which is failure to reduce risk of death or serious injury to our staff, other persons working on council assets, and to members of the public travelling on the public highway. Also, damage to council assets caused by non-competent persons carrying out installation works, organisational liability for Conwy Council and the commissioning body, which are the town and community councils, for failure to check competence of contractors, personal liability for officers involved in commissioning or permitting work to take place, and also reputational damage if an incident occurs involving a non-competent person working on highway electrical assets, especially when there is a clear and obvious method to reduce the risk of that happening. Therefore, there are recommendations that we wish to put forward that following an appropriate transition period, all contractors carrying out highway electrical works in the County Borough of Conwy, including installation of decorative festive lighting, are required to be accredited to the Highway Electrical Registration Scheme. Also, that the amendments to the conditions for the installation of festive or decorative illuminations, specifically to include the requirements for contractors to be accredited to the Highway Electrical Registration Scheme, is supported. Thank you. That's the end of my summary of the report.
Well, thank you very much, Dylan. Councillor Michael Smith, you got your hand up first, I believe.
Yeah,
Jesus, I've had my hand up since the very beginning, but as usual, I'm ignored.
Hi, Councillor Bob. Is this your digital hand? I've been looking.
Pardon?
I was looking for your digital hand, but go on, Bob, you go first.
I've had my hand up through the picture. My God, it happens every committee, which is why, Chair, I didn't vote for you to be chair of this committee, because you've ignored me. Every single committee.
Well, I must add, Bob, that you're the only person on this committee that doesn't use his yellow digital hand.
Well, that's what's happened anyway.
When you're adjusting the screen on your iPad, it looks like you're signalling, and I can't tell the difference.
No, right, well,
digital hand.
I've waited.
Can I also apologise on behalf of officers for not picking up as well? Your hand.
Okay, but I want to, Chair, I want to propose. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, I want to propose the recommendation to support revision to this policy. No problem with that. It's obvious common sense. What my question is, what about other electrical work activities, such as caravan sites, residential homes, wholesale and many others activities within Conwy? Who would investigate incidents, electrical incidents, and if necessary, institute proceedings of the Health and Safety at Work Act against any infringements of the Health and Safety at Work Act? Who would do that? That's my first question.
Okay, Dylan.
Sorry to sign on mute. Yeah, I'm not sure I'm in the position to best answer that question, only that this report specifically refers to highway electrical works. So I'm not too sure if anyone else can offer an answer to Councillor Squire's question.
Yes, I understand, Dylan. I'm not having a go at you, Dylan. What I'm getting at is the lack of knowledge of councillors on this council of their responsibilities under the Health and Safety at Work Act to all other people at work. Fair enough, we've got to look after our own employees. No problem with that. But there's thousands of people at work in this authority. And if I don't know whether Councillor Peter is still with us, but Councillor Peter will remember, I'm going back 30, 40 years, to an incident on a caravan site in his district when a 21-year-old person who just come out of his time as an electrician was electrocuted. And I instituted proceedings against ManWeb. In the end, ManWeb, it was dropped because ManWeb pleaded guilty, and rightly so, because they had infringed the Health and Safety at Work Act. Nevertheless, I've noticed that now this council doesn't care about the responsibility for the rest. I'm not having, Dylan, bear in mind, I am not being critical of you. Your report is fine. But this council just ignores their responsibility to all other people at work. And if an electrical accident happened in sites which the council is responsible for, such as caravan sites, residential homes, wholesale premises, many others, thousands of employees, then there seems to be no action. And that's against entirely against the statutory duty under the Health and Safety at Work Act. I'm sorry about this, but I really felt like setting off because of it. And I think we need a report to this council, big style, from Peter Brown to tell members what their responsibilities are under the Health and Safety at Work Act to the whole population of Conwy. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that thought, Bob. To be honest, I think you're totally wrong. But if there is a report that comes forward, then maybe we might be able to find out. So I take it that's a proposal. We'll see if anybody's willing to second your proposal.
I'll second it, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Keith, we'll take that on board. Thank you very much.
Could I be clear? If I'm not too sure what the report is that we're being asked to present. Can I just ask for clarity?
Can you unmute yourself, please, Bob?
Sorry, the responsibilities of the council under the Health and Safety at Work Act to all its residents.
Again, Bob, I struggle to see how we are responsible for private businesses and people's homes, electrical safety wise.
That, Chair, is exactly the problem, because we are responsible, because we have a statutory duty to all them premises to enforce the Act. Simple as that.
I struggle to see it, Bob, but I'll be happy to have a look.
Sorry, Chair, but I'm sorry, Chair, but you should know things like this, being the chair of this committee. And so, not just you, Chair, I'm not going to go at you, but so should all other members, especially those in Cabinet, should understand what their duties are, and they don't.
Yeah, if I could comment, I think I understand where Councillor Bob's coming from. Specifically, you got the Electricity at Work Regulations of 1989 and the Building Act 1984 and 2000. So that would partially fall under the actual remit of our regulatory services because it goes through building regulations and building regulation control. So that's one side of it. But obviously, actual health and safety at work is dealt with by the HSE as an enforcement agency rather than the council. But I think it would be quite interesting to see the response from regulatory services on this.
Absolute rubbish, Chair, from the Cabinet member. Absolute rubbish. The Health and Safety at Work Act came in 1974. The allocation regulations came in 1978, and they allocated premises to the HSE and to us. And we were demarcated on that. We had responsibility and still have responsibility for enforcing the Act, investigating accidents, the whole caboose in premises that are not the HSE's. HSE deals largely with factories. When I was working, we dealt it entirely with other premises, such as caravan sites, such as offices, shops, railway premises, such as wholesale premises, whole caboose. We don't even look at them. We're breaking the law, Chair.
Well, you've made a suggestion here, Bob, and it has been seconded by Councillor Keith Eales. We will put that to the vote. If members are happy to ask officers to provide a report on the council's responsibility for health and safety in caravan parks and private homes, as Councillor Bob has requested.
And many other.
Then we'll put it to the vote. Happy with that, Bob?
I'll have to be, won't I? I feel
Okay.
very incensed about this, Chair.
Well, I'll be interested to see if it is our responsibility, because I don't think it is, but let's have a look. If
I'll
members are
remember
happy,
what you said, Chair. I'll remember what you said.
yeah, if members are happy for a report to come forward, please could you show? Thank you very much. We will ask officers to look into that, Bob. Thank you for raising that point. Could I now ask Councillor Ken Stevens if he has a comment on the report?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for allowing me to speak. I just really wanted to know what it means for us, really. We're a small group and we've been doing putting our own Christmas decorative lighting up now for 22 years, actually. You obviously use a cherry picker. We have an electrician who does any electrical work for us, a local electrician. And all our installations had been done years ago, really. So all we do now really is put the features up on the lamppost, which we buy from a guy in Stockport who does work for the Blackpool Illuminations. So we put the feature up there and we connect it, and then we switch the timer on. And that's it. That's all we do. So why do we need this hairs person to do that? I mean, why can't we use a local electrician if we have any problems?
We will ask Dylan to answer that question for you.
Yeah, well, without knowing the specifics of the what's entailed in your festive decorations, however, it is, you know, at the end of the day, it is utilising highway electrical assets for electrical feeds and placing festive decorations on highway electrical assets. So unfortunately, it would fall within the HERS scheme accreditation.
Okay, thank you for that. We use LEDs now, that's all we ever do. I mean, I think, let me put it in context. A lot of the stuff in this report is very good. It's what we should be doing anyway. We do it normally. We use low voltage for Christmas tree lights and things like that. And as I say, all our features are LEDs. Okay, well, thank you for that anyway. Thank you for the answer.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ken. From a local perspective in Town and Kimmel Bay, we use a licensed electrical contractor who has his own cherry picker, which he is licensed to operate. He was quite surprised when he heard that he might have to sign up to this HERS accreditation, because it's not a qualification, it's an accreditation, because he's already qualified. And his thoughts are it's just going to bring additional costs coming forward, which I think, you know, back in the early or late 1980s when they brought out the iOS 9000 accreditation for suppliers, that only put up the cost of supplies to businesses. And in 2005, I think it was, the iOS 9001 was another layer of paperwork and additional costs for businesses. My personal thoughts are that this Highways Electrical Contractors accreditation will be the same. They'll all end up with a nice sticker for their van and have to do additional paperwork, which will come at a cost to the end user, which is the town and community councils. Councillor Harry Saville.
Yes, thanks, Chairman. Look, I was having a look through the report, and Dylan, welcome to your first scrutiny committee here in Conway. Dylan mentioned that the Health and Safety Executive had given us some guidance on this. Now, I can't see that explicitly referenced in the report, but it does make reference to an incident near Merthyr Tydfil in 2016. And then it goes on to say that whilst we've had no fatalities or serious injuries resulting from this kind of electrical work in Conway until now, there have been some near misses. Now, what I'm wondering is, would introducing or would making this accreditation a requirement for anyone working on our street lighting assets, would that have actually have addressed those near misses? Because other than just, you know, making reference to them in the report, it doesn't explain what was involved, what caused the near misses, how this would have actually ever prevented them from happening. I mean, if this will actually have a tangible benefit, I'm really quite supportive of it. But, you know, as Nigel's pointed out, and I think as Ken's pointed out previously before this meeting, this will potentially have significant costs for some of our town and community councils. And I'm not clear exactly what the impact or the tangible benefit of this will be in practice.
Dylan, do you have an answer?
Yeah, it's difficult to answer whether it would have had an effect on historical incidents, but the accreditation does look at 12 key competency of the highway electrical engineers, if we call them, and you know it does look at stuff like traffic management, which is, you know, beyond the scope of a domestic electrician, working alongside the highway. You know, operator's license for stuff like platform working, cherry pickers, ladder working. So it is more than just the competency of an electrician. And, you know, it does, therefore, if all operators working on the council-owned assets and on the public highway are fully competent and qualified, well, that does reduce the risk to the council and also the members of the public.
Thank you for that, Dylan. Before I bring in the next speaker, could I ask, because the recommendation is following an appropriate transition period, contractors carrying out highway electrical works in the county borough of Conway will need to have this electrical accreditation. What is a appropriate transition period? Can we answer that, please, Andrew?
Sorry, yeah, Chair. Yeah, I think we've said after we had feedback from town and community councils, they were concerned about this being coming in immediately. So we've said that we will give 6 months for people to come up to this standard, which, you know, we know from our own staff going through it that is achievable. And just to answer a bit more about the last question, this isn't about a sticker on a van, it's not about accreditation, it's not about a certificate. It's about ensuring the people doing the work are competent and properly trained to do the work. And it's correct, an accreditation scheme works like any other quality scheme. It's essentially an audit to check people have had the right training. And the important thing for us is that the staff who work for electrical contractors have had the proper training and are not being put at risk, either putting themselves at risk, as Councillor Bob has referred to, or putting the public at risk by their actions. So there are a number of items of training which are checked by this registration scheme, including have they got the proper licence for the cherry picker, have they got the proper traffic management qualification, because often this is work that occurs within the public highway, have they got the safe interaction and safe isolation of highway electrical equipment, have they done that training? And we've got to remember as well that the town council is under a legal obligation to ensure the competency of the contractor they employ. And to say they've done it for 20 years and, well, I know them and the guy used to work for so-and-so, when the HSE come investigating, that's not going to fly as ensuring competence. So what we're trying to do is to assist the town councils in fulfilling their legal duty, but it's not about sticker on a van. It's about have the workers being given the proper training to carry out the work that they're being asked to do.
Yeah, I'm sure you're not going to try and say that the contractors that the councils are using are not necessarily unqualified, because I can tell you that the ones that we use in town and Kimbleby are highly qualified, and quite an interesting site, the HERS site. The modules that you can fulfil there for half a day or a day for each one, very interesting. And at the end, I presume that you do get a sticker. Councillor Michael Smith.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. You know, a lot of what I wanted to cover at the beginning has been said, so I don't think we've had a seconder yet, so I would like to second the recommendation. But, you know, this has come about from a tragic incident, as Harry referred to, that was mentioned in the report. It's a competence-led accreditation. Yes, there's cost implications to our own staff and those who are already doing the job, you know, in the private sector. But as with everything, you pay for these qualifications. If you want, you can probably put up your price because you're qualified to do the job. And yeah, then you can crack on and do the work. So, you know, for peace of mind from the local authority and the town and a member of the town and community council, you know, I want to second that and you know, look to support this. So yeah, I look forward to it coming into transition, you know, in a timely manner. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Councillor.
You were on mute then,
Yeah.
Chair.
Councillor Ken Stevens.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's this word competent I have a problem with. You know, we've always used local businesses, guys who run their own business and are competent and are qualified to do that kind of thing. All right, so they haven't got this HERS thing, but you can't. I think it's wrong. It's shaming them to say that they're not competent because they haven't got this qualification. We have our own traffic signals. We have the stop-go signs wherever we're working. The guy, like you say, it's his own cherry pick, and he's qualified to do that kind of thing. We even have a harness which you have to strap yourself into the basket to make sure you don't fall out. We do all this stuff already, you know. But as I say, I'm worried about costs, especially for small towns like ours. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, I'm sure, you know, we are all concerned about the cost going up, but it's going to be inevitable and something that we're just going to have to take on the chin. Councillor Andrew Wood.
Thanks, Chair. I totally understand. I totally agree with standards getting better and being enforced, and you know, accreditations and so on and so forth. But as Ken points out, a lot of these electrical companies are totally accredited. They're accredited with using cherry pickers, working on highways, working at height, working to SICC standards, gold standards, gateway standards. There's our own Christmas decorations fitter. Basically, has got all the accreditations he needs. Now, he's quite happy to go on to this sort of module and look at this module, but it will take him a bit of time just to finish this module. Now, the biggest problem for all the town and community councils is at the moment, if I may be Dylan or Andrew Wilkinson correct me, there are no accredited HERS electrical specialists working at height in Conway. I think the only one is our own Conway. We're a council which has just got accreditation. So come a few more weeks down the line, I don't know if anybody's going to get their Christmas decorations fitted this year, because it is quite a time-consuming thing to do. I would recommend that, you know, I would totally agree with the report and, you know, and standards within ERF and what Andrew and Gary and Dylan are going towards. But I would propose, in our case, we've already sort of got a contractor ready to go, which we've used for the last 5 years. And he is more than competent. He is fully qualified for working at heights and on highways. But I would suggest that this Hurst, the accreditation, stretches out. So it starts maybe January 2022. So it embodies the fact that there's a timing for the electrical contractors we use to be either comply to it or accreditate themselves, or if they don't, then we can then seek maybe using somebody else who has got accreditation. I think I can understand it's not rushed 6 months, but a lot of town councils like ourselves, Abergele, have already put somebody in place after the Christmas decoration was finished last year. So I can't propose it, I'm not a member of this committee, but maybe you should think about pushing that just that time period back until early 2022, just to give everybody a chance. Otherwise, as I said before, you won't be having any Christmas decorations this year, and that will really cause a problem, I think. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for your thoughts on that, Andrew. And it's something that I was thinking as well, that as a business who's trying to operate and qualify at the same time, 6 months may be a little bit tight. We've already selected our contractor and told him that we'd want them for this Christmas, and now we're having to backpedal because of this Hares if he's not qualified. So it's putting a lot of pressure on us, and if we don't get the Christmas lights up at Christmas, it's going to affect the morale of the residents locally. So I'm just wondering whether Councillor Harry and Councillor Michael will be happy to change their proposal and to look at your recommendation, which will be January 2022. Harry?
I think I'd missed seconding something.
No, it was Bob Squires that did the proposal.
Sorry, Councillor Bob.
He's not present at his camera.
Okay, well, as the second of the proposal, would you be happy to accept
I think it's only fair. You have to make plans in advance, and I know that our town council have agreed to already use one. Looks like Ken has. Andrew's saying the same. If members, would look, but I would look to amend that recommendation that we look to give them time to complete it. Anyone that's in the field will look to do this accreditation. I'm sure of that.
Councillor Bob, are you there? If you are, could you turn on your camera, please?
He's still in the meeting, Chair.
It says he is. Maybe he's gone for a comfort break. Would the alternative be to have a separate proposal?
I'm more than happy to make that my own proposal, and if someone wants to second, we accept the recommendation with the extension to January 2022 for people to get the HERS qualification or accreditation in time.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that?
Can I ask, Chair, officers as to where we are into?
Councillor Milne, would you mind turning your video off? Your sound quality is poor.
Okay. Can I ask that we have a response from officers regards any legal complications of extending this that might come on the council itself?
All right, Andrew?
Yes, hello? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the question really is for town councils. That is where the legal burden as the commissioning body falls as to ensuring competence of contractors. I would, if it was me as a town clerk or part of the town council commissioning somebody to work on street lights, I would want to make sure they were properly qualified and have that evidence. Accreditation is one of the ways that evidence can be provided, but how do you know that these companies have all the tickets required for this Christmas season? How would we propose that happens? Now, the last thing we want to work with town councils, the last thing we want to do is to not have Christmas decorations. We don't want that at all, but we do want to raise the make sure the standards of work and of training for workers are adequate. So I think if you do adopt this recommendation, then and it gets approved by cabinet, then we would still have to find some way, I think, I wouldn't feel responsible to just let town councils commission work on our street lights without any sort of checks or evidence of competence of contractors. So we'd have to find another way of doing that as an interim solution.
Well,
so
I think
that's the only caveat. And again, just saying, well, he's done it for the last 20 years, he knows what he's doing. That's not going to fly when the HSE comes calling. We want to see certificates.
Andrew, could I just say, I think your comments are a little bit off towards local town councils. We are highly skilled clerks in place who do all the checks and use proper contractors. I would remind you of that. And they have used them contractors for many years. And the suggestion that they are using them illegally or unqualified people is a little bit off, I feel, Andrew. Councillor Bob, there's been a recommendation.
Can I come back?
Not at the moment, Andrew, please. Councillor Bob, whilst you're here, Councillor Andrew Wood suggested that he fully supports the recommendations, but feels that the 6 months to implement the recommendation could be a little bit tight, as many of the local contractors may not be able to qualify in time for the Christmas period. Bearing in mind they have to start putting the lights up in November. Would you be happy to alter your recommendation so that it comes into force in January 22? That was what Andrew was asking.
I would want to do nothing to stop the Christmas lights, I'll be honest, because this has gone on for a long, long time, Chair.
Yes.
And what I'm concerned about is the fact that members of this council have disregarded their statutory duties in favour of other things and much minor things. And when there comes a death through anything with health and safety at work, I know I'm right. I've enforced the Act for such a long time, and I know the people that matter. I don't mean that in a threat, but they know that what I'm talking is sense. And I want to see this council's got a hell of a good reputation, and I want this council to continue that reputation, but it won't if it disregards the safety of the people that work within Conway. So I'm happy to go with that, as long as the lights are safe, obviously. No problem with that, but I want this report to come to this council because there's big problems, Chair.
Well, the report will be coming, Bob. It's just whether we implement the HARES accreditation prior to Christmas.
No, that's fair enough.
Or after Christmas.
Yeah, I did propose approval of the recommendation.
But are you happy for that to happen after January or in January 22 rather?
I'll have to be, Chair. I'll have to be.
All right, that's fine. As long as we clarified that.
Yeah.
Okay, Andrew, you wanted to come back.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I was been in no way critical of town councils. We want to help town councils to fulfil their duty. We're willing to help by looking at looking at existing contracts that town councils might have to look and advise as to how we can help them to fulfil their legal duty. It was in no way casting aspersions on town councils. It was an offer of assistance.
Okay, thank you very much.
Was saying that if you do choose to delay the implementation of this, that we would be willing to assist in the short term, in the interim period, to ensure that all standards were maintained and that nobody was in any sort of safety or legal jeopardy. That's
Okay.
all it was, Chair.
We thank you for that. Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Keith Eales.
Thank you, Chair. I tend to side with Andrew Wilkinson here. I did interpret his comments the way he's explained that it can be if someone's been doing it for years, doing these lights, and they've just been plugging in, then obviously you can get away with not having qualifications. I do understand from town councils. I do understand from town council's aspect that they've had people planned to do the Christmas light. So I do support the implementation from January 2022. The only thing I would sort of try and see, I don't know what the highest current qualification is for electrics for carrying out these sort of works, but I would think for now, if it is withheld until 2022, before the HARES accreditation needs to come in, then I think there should at least be a minimum standard of an electrician to install these lights, if you know what I mean. So if we do delay it, which I don't mind, but I think we should make sure or pass some sort of thing that the electricians should be qualified at least to a certain standard for now. So that's my sort of opinion to the committee. My other question was to see if it could be clarification regarding putting lights on Christmas trees. So am I correct in assuming that if a Christmas tree is set back off the road and it's nothing to do with a lamp column, that the light installation doesn't need to be done by a HARES accredited electrician? Because in Llandullis here, the land that the tree is on is Chraffu land, and the lights plug into a junction box, and it's literally a 3-pin plug in an electrical box. So I think something as straightforward as that, not on the light column, shouldn't be. I just think it needs clarification for clerks and town and community councils.
I would imagine, Keith, that if it's Conwy infrastructure, it would have to be done by a HARES accredited contractor following January 22, if that's how the vote goes. Okay. Councillor Harry Saville.
Yeah, again, thank you, Chairman. I think Keith possibly picked up on one of the questions I was going to ask, or where I'm going to go for a point I'm going to pursue. Right, we said there's a legal responsibility that anyone that's working on the highway is suitably qualified. Am I right with that? So, I mean, this won't be a new legal responsibility, will it? I mean, how long has it been around for?
Andrew, could you answer that, please?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been around for a while. Yeah, I couldn't tell you exact number of years.
Okay, I mean, the question I've got, I mean, look, in the report, it talks about an amendment to the conditions for installation of festive or decorative illumination. So that suggests to me that we already have some sort of qualification that we expect people to meet or attain. The question mark in my mind is, and look, I'll put this bluntly, if that current standard that we insist on isn't safe, then what has brought it to your attention that it's not safe, and why are we only dealing with it now? I mean, I wonder if we, it seems to me, look, there's this discussion here about should we look at postponing this until 2022? Well, as far as I see it, either the situation we have at the moment is dangerous, in which case we should bring in these new requirements as soon as possible, or these new requirements are not actually going to address any shortcoming in the current regime we have. So what's the point? If you can see where I'm going with this, I hope I've articulated that properly, Andrew. I mean, what shortcomings with the current conditions? I mean, without having them in front of us in the agenda, I can't point to anything.
Yeah, and I think the conditions for town councils to install things on our apparatus, I think there was a gap in there regarding the ensuring the competence of people carrying out the work. There was lots of things about sort of the liability and what needs to be done as far as the actual sort of structures and assets. But I think there was a gap there in as far as how we ensure the qualifications specifically for highway electrical work. And again, this is not any criticism of contractors, but it is a very specific type of operation, and there was a gap there in our current conditions, which our street lighting managers very diligently picked up and has proposed a change, and it fits in as well with the wider competence of contractors work led by corporate health and safety across the council, looking at qualifications and standards for all contractors working on council buildings. I'm sure members have been on other committees where reports have come through regarding sort of safety work being commissioned in works being commissioned in schools and other buildings, and about how we ensure competence of contractors. So it's very much on the corporate radar. We haven't always been perfect, but when we find a problem, that's when we try and put it right, and that's what we think this requirement for training of staff and to make sure staff are of contractors are adequately trained will fill a gap where we previously didn't have that requirement. I think we've had it for ourselves, but I think it's probably and if we had a representative from corporate health and safety here, they might say that in the past we've been less focused on subcontractor work and contractor work. We focused on our own staff safety, all our policies and everything has been in place. But we also have a responsibility for contractors working in our buildings and on our assets. And this is something that's recently come to our attention, and we're trying to put it right.
Okay, thanks for that. Just one more question. In the report, you talk about an appropriate transition period. I think we as members have suggested for 2022. What do you think would be an appropriate transition period?
So I'm getting a lot of interference on sound there.
Ian Richardson needs to
look, the other question I had is in the report, it talks about an appropriate transition period. Now, we as members have suggested early 2022, but what do officers feel would be an appropriate transition period?
Well, we thought that 6 months would be. I think if you decide to recommend that it's longer, I think that presents some issues. But again, I'll repeat what I said. We're happy to work with town councils to try and resolve their issues and minimise their risk and exposure. So, we would recommend that it's 6 months. And that would be sufficient for the relevant companies to do the appropriate training if they haven't got it already. A lot of this training and qualifications these companies will have already, but it's just about checking that they do have that, and that's where we can we can perhaps in an interim period assist town councils in being able to do that before there is an accreditation scheme in place.
Okay.
Chair, I'm not sure whether Geraint or Jane want to come in on that issue. They've raised their hands.
Yes, please.
Go on, Geraint.
In a direct answer to Councillor Harry's question is that we won't be tested unless an incident or an accident happens. And if we are tested, and I sincerely hope that we're not, we or the town council, particularly the town council, are not, having been involved in a fatality on a site in the early part of my career, where the HSE came in looking to prosecute the local authority. The first question, or one of the first questions that they will ask, will be around the competence of the electrician that has been used. And they will use hers as an example. And the question will be asked, and whether that's by the HSE or further on by a court, question will be asked as to why whoever employed that electrician decided that it wasn't appropriate to ask for them to be hers registered. And somebody will have to answer that question. And that's why I think if we don't get an incident and we don't get anything that happens, you're safe. But if we do, I don't want to be in that space of answering that question. I don't want my officers to be in that space of answering that question, because I don't have an answer, because it is reasonable, in my opinion.
I can see you, Bob, in a minute.
It's reasonable for us to be able to engage contractors who can demonstrate their competency through having hers. That's my opinion, what it's worth.
Thank you for that, Geraint. Jeffrey Corrie, you've been waiting patiently for a long time. Can I just bring Jeff in?
Yes, so actually my question's been asked about 2 or 3 times, particularly by Harry and Keith. And I was going to ask the question, what if? Which has just been answered now, basically. So you're asking us to vote on something. In reality, is what if? I didn't like the answer there, to be honest, because I'll be putting ourselves into a position if there is a fatality. I think Bob is exactly right what he said. I fully agree with him. Better that we do know our situation. But going back to what Geraint said, is a big question. Should we be delaying it? And basically that's what he's saying. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Bob?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I totally agree with Geraint in what he said, because the council would be very susceptible, and I wouldn't like to be in that situation. But nevertheless, what we mustn't forget is that that situation could reoccur in thousands of premises in this county, because we are not enforcing the Health and Safety at Work Act in the same way. The same regulations apply to all premises, not just to this council. And I'm sorry, but the cabinet of this council think that all health and safety is about looking after our own. That, I'm sorry, is not the situation. We've got thousands of people at work to look after. And until that message gets through, we will never, ever get this sort of situation resolved. Sorry, Chair, but I really feel strongly on this.
It will be coming, Bob. I have no doubt about that. Is Jane Richardson with us?
I am. Sorry, members, my video's given up. Yeah, sorry, I can't look at you properly. Chair, I was going to make a suggestion, because it's been a really good quality debate, and I think you've heard the arguments both sides, you've heard the risks of not doing it and why some people want to. So can I suggest, you've got a proposal to accept the recommendations. Can I suggest that somebody might want to propose an amendment to that proposal, which is about delaying it until the January 22 and putting in alternative requirements for a minimum level of competency, as Councillor Keith suggested. If somebody were to propose that as an amendment with someone to second it, you could then take a vote on that specific issue, and then you'd know where you stood. Would that help?
Well, I think that's basically where we've got to, Jane. But yeah, thank you
Yeah,
very much.
I will second that, Chair, because at least it's progress.
We'll make it your proposal, Bob, because you're the only one. And if Michael's happy to second that.
Is Michael seconding?
Yeah, can I just say that although we're asking till January 2020, Andrew's comment about being 6 months transition period takes us to January 2021. Well, it's a month more, couple of weeks. So it's not really an extension in real terms. We just want to see us get the Christmas decorations up, and like has been mentioned, I think it was Andrew again, or no, it was Geraint, sorry, possibly, that most of these people will have the accreditation in place by that time anyway. But I just want to see that we move this recommendation and give our competent installers fair time to get the accreditation, and thank you for Andrew and his team for looking after the town councils and looking at what accreditation they've got currently and giving support to them. So yeah, thank you for that. Can we take it to the vote?
Thank you, Councillor Michael. We've got Councillor Ken Stevens for his final words.
I was going to make the point, Chair, that the difference between the two positions, I mean, if we're being realistic, is 1 month. 6 months takes us up to November, and you're talking about 1 month to take it to January, aren't you? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, members, so we're going to take it to the vote, and it is...
Have you got a proposer and a seconder, Councillor Nigel, for that amendment?
Councillor Bob has proposed it, and Councillor Michael was happy to second it. It was just a slight alteration to the original proposal.
Yeah, before we go to the vote, can I just confirm what it is that you're voting on? So it's the original proposal, but an extension of implementation to January 2022. And also, yeah, January 2022, and also a minimum level of competency in place.
Correct.
Yep. Okay, fine. So we have a proposer and we have a seconder. So I will read out your names. So for or against, please. So Councillor Carol Beard. Councillor Carol, I don't think she's here. Okay. Councillor Jeff Corrie.
For.
Councillor Sam Cotton. No, she's left as well. Okay. Councillor Keith Eales.
For.
Councillor Pat Hebron. Councillor Pat, oh, she is here, yeah.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Chris Hughes. Councillor Hughes, yeah, he is here. Councillor Chris Hughes.
Sorry, Chair, my mic wouldn't unmute. Yeah, I'm for the proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Abdul Khan. No, he's not here anymore. Councillor Don Milne. No. Councillor John Roberts. No. Councillor Harry Saville.
Harry, you're here.
For.
Councillor Michael Smith.
Yeah, for.
Councillor Nigel Smith.
Obliged.
Councillor Bob Squire.
Obliged, but I hope members take note of everything I said tonight, Chair.
Councillor Joan has left. Councillor Aaron Wynne.
Obliged.
Yeah, that's carried, Chair.
Okay, so that's been approved by the members. I want to thank everybody, officers, members, for the time this evening. Dylan Jones, welcome to Conway, and hope you have a long and successful career with us. So that's about it, members. Have a good evening. And I was going to wish you all a safe journey home, but you're probably already there. So take care.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks all. Tea time.